I lived with my friend Nick in a small house a few years ago. He was my roommate in my first year, and we decided to move out of the dorms and rent a house. We shared the rent equally amongst us. It was our first time renting a room, so we didn't know how to budget appropriately. We realized later that the rent for that place was eating up our bank accounts. We either had to move out or search for a roommate. We chose to search for a roommate. We started by asking other friends, but none was interested. We posted online, saying we were looking for a roommate. I posted on Facebook Marketplace, while Nick posted on Craigslist. Weeks passed, and no one seemed interested in moving in with us. Then Nick showed me an email from someone called Sam, replying to his Craigslist post. Sam seemed serious and came the following day to check the house. He was a few years older than us. Sam also seemed nice and clean. We took him in. He paid his part of the rent and moved in the following week. Sam started hanging out with us often in the coming months, so we knew him well. Then suddenly, he became very closed up for some reason. Nick and I barely saw him, and he barely talked when we were lucky to meet him. He would stay locked up in his room most of the time. Sam would only come out to take food or when leaving for work. His behavior seemed strange, but it didn't bother me. One evening, I was coming home from work, and Nick called me quietly to his room. He told me Sam was home and I shouldn't talk too loudly. He said he smelt a strong odor when passing by Sam's room. Nick asked me to quietly pass Sam's room to see whether I would notice something strange. I did notice the awful smell Nick was talking about. We both agreed to ask him what that weird smell was. We knocked several times at his door, but he didn't answer. Nick assured me Sam was inside. We gave up trying to make Sam open his door, so we decided to ask him the following day. I caught Sam the next day leaving for work and asked him about the smell. He said it was the trash in his room, though his answer didn't seem convincing enough. I got home from work the next day, and Nick and Sam were in their rooms. I assumed they were sleeping, but didn't wake them up, so I went straight to bed. I heard some movements below my room, where Sam's room was downstairs. I wondered what Sam was doing. I ignored the movements and fell asleep again. Sam ran to work the following morning. However, he didn't return that night. Days passed, and he never returned. I called him several times, but all the calls instantly went to voicemail. We checked his room, and it was pretty messy, as if he had already parked and taken out most of his stuff. We called the police and told them our roommate was missing. An officer came to our place that night to ask some questions. We gave him a picture of the three of us, which we had taken when Sam moved in. A detective called us and told us the identity of the man in the photo. We gave to the police wasn't Sam's. He said someone recognized him as his son, who had been missing for nearly a year. The case got complicated, and there was no one to update us. The guy we knew as Sam was a regular man living with his parents until he went missing. He has never returned to our house. It was such a creepy and exciting experience. I recently finished college and was looking for somewhere to stay as I searched for a job. I worked part-time at a grocery store, but had to get a better job after graduation. Apartments were way too expensive for me to rent alone. I started looking for a home with spare rooms to rent. An old campus friend suggested I search for a cheaper house on Craigslist. I was frustrated after searching for some days with no success. Most people won't respond to my messages, and those who did said the rooms had already been rented. A new room popped up one Saturday morning. It was a nice room and nearby. In the description, a man called Tom was advertising it as a large room with a spare bedroom for rent. It also had a separate bathroom and closet. It sounded perfect. I emailed him about my interest and went to work. Since the house was advertised that morning, I knew I was the first person to contact him. I checked my emails during the lunch break and saw Tom had replied. He told me to go check the room in the evening. I knew I would be tired by evening, but I had to go since I badly needed a place to stay. We agreed on the time to meet. I went there after work, which took me just 10 minutes. The house looked nice from the outside. I parked by the roadside and went to the front door. There was no response when I knocked on the door at first. I knocked again harder after 30 seconds. I was about to text Tom to let him know I had arrived at his house, but he opened the door and let me in. I noticed he was sweating as if he had just finished a long workout. He showed me around the ground level floor, the kitchen, and the living room. He said he didn't use the 2 rooms frequently, so I shouldn't mind getting in his way. But it looked as if he was using them too often. There were stains on the couch and dirty utensils piling in the sink. The place was too dirty, unlike what he had posted. Tom led the way upstairs to show me my room. He stopped when he reached the bottom of the steps and held his hand out as if gesturing me to walk up first. I got a weird and uncomfortable feeling while going up the stairs. He didn't follow me but said my room was the first one on the left. I continued to the top and took a few steps into the hallway. I heard a soft thud from behind the door to what he said was supposed to be my room. I looked down at Tom and asked him whether someone else lived there. Annoyed, he told me a friend stayed the night and that I shouldn't worry about it. He asked me to check the room for he was sure I would like it. I pretended to be confident and walked down the stairs, telling him the place wouldn't work out for me. He didn't like my reaction and stood before me to block the way. I told him that I needed to leave. He asked me to check the room again while cornering me against the wall, but I said I wasn't interested. He looked at me, smiled, and told me it was fine. Tom stepped aside, and I quickly walked past him toward the door. Something weird was happening in that house. I was fortunate to walk away that easily. I checked Craigslist and saw that the advert had been deleted. I still wonder who was in that room upstairs. Craigslist is among the first sites I visit when purchasing something. They offer great deals for things that would otherwise be very expensive. At the time, I was searching for workout equipment, which is costly to buy new. Craigslist was a great site to purchase used ones cheaply. I checked the site for used weight equipment for a couple of days. I found a posting that looked amazing. It was a set of weights for a pretty good deal. It had been posted a couple of hours ago. The profile owner was called Mary. I sent her an email right away and told her I was interested in her weights and that I was available to come and pick them up as soon as possible. She replied a few minutes later, saying she would be available from 7 in the evening when she got home from work. It was a bit late, but I had to drive to her place since I needed the weights as soon as possible. We agreed to meet at her place, and she gave me her address. I looked up to see where her home was. It was 20 minutes away in a small neighborhood that I'm familiar with, since an old friend used to live nearby. The house was regular sized, and it didn't have any defining features. Although it looked pretty old, nothing was too strange or gave bad vibes about the house. I drove there that night. It was at the end of the road, and I parked outside the house. I walked to the front door, which was already open. I didn't want to walk straight into the house, so I knocked a few times. A man came down from the hall minutes later. I greeted him and told him I was there to talk to Mary about some workout stuff she had posted on Craigslist. He welcomed me inside and told me Mary would be there in a minute after changing her work clothes. I felt cautious, but he sounded genuine and believable. I followed him to the living room and saw the sets on the floor. There was nothing else in the room other than sets, no furniture or decorations. The man could see me looking around, and he quickly said that they were moving out, and that's why they were trying to sell the weights. Still skeptical, I looked at them for a minute. But I noticed a few things were missing. I asked him if this was everything because I thought I saw more in the pictures. He smiled and told me Mary knew where the other ones were. The man then stood there looking at me. I started feeling uncomfortable around him. I asked him to check on Mary and tell her I was there for the waits. He agreed after a minute and started going upstairs. I was beginning to worry that Mary might not be a real person. I listened intently to hear if he was talking to someone. After a few seconds of silence, I went to the bottom of the stairs. The man stood at the top of the stairs, staring at the walls. I discovered all this was a lie, and I could be in the middle of something horrible. I silently approached the front door, trying not to alert the man. I could hear heavy footsteps running down the stairs as soon as I turned around. I ran into my car, and I could see the man at the front door trying to tell me to wait. Strangely, the man ran outside the house to the back as I drove away. I called the police to inform them what was happening in that house. I didn't understand the man's intentions, but I could tell he was up to something terrible.